hard ones we tackled as a company. So, yeah, doing it manually is kind of insane, right? Humans are good at certain things. One thing we're terrible at is remembering long lists of things accurately, right? 7-digit phone numbers are that way because most humans can remember 7 discrete things at once. 250,000 configuration items in the cloud, give up. You know, you need automation. You just have to have it. Okay.
Going once? Any more questions?
In some of the not too distant past, GRC tool, governance, regulatory, and compliance, if you wanted to set up policies in there, you'd need to hire a team of developers to create the policies. How are you able to automate the process of putting policies in place?
Yeah, so right now, for example, so first of all, we build the big libraries for you. So when you purchase Fugue, you get NIST. Now there are parts of NIST 853 that are like, you know, access to data floor by humans. We can't do anything with that, right? But a big chunk of the roughly 1,800 controls, hundreds of them, we can ship to you in the product the ability to say, you know, all right, for a virtual private cloud network, you have to have flow logs on, and that's line 27 of your code, and that violates rule XYZ of 800-53. So that comes in the box. But what if you want to extend it or make it different? So we do have a very powerful and simple policy language. Even relatively complex policies are pretty short. And we're, right now, I can't give you a release date, but we're working on graphical editors for those things as well, to try, because you shouldn't need developers. But right now you get, again, NIST, HIPAA, GDPR, CIS benchmark out of the box. We'll be adding PCI soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. Now it's Matt Schmidt's turn. He has more than a couple of years of business leadership experience. He's responsible for Savient's U.S. public sector business. His software sales career, has spanned most industry verticals with a focus on delivering simplified solutions to highly engineered products, programs, and enterprise initiatives. He works for Savient now, and they do cloud stuff too. Let's see what they're doing different and what problem they're solving for us.
So, one second, I'm trying to figure out where the mirroring option is.
All cap.
All cap? Mirror displays. So I heard the uh-oh when he said sales, so I'll be careful. But once again, my name is Matt, and before I get started, whoops, I did mirroring. Before I get started, who here is from the government, works for a government agency? Who works for a systems integrator? I want to be careful what I say. Let's see. Open display. That should do it. Nope. Well, what I'm going to do is this. Maybe I don't want to do that. Anybody know how to get this to... So once again, I'm not technical. Where is the...
Go ahead and click on present mode.
Present mode? 1 second.
In the bottom. That's the presentation thing.
Yeah, I can't see that now. I screwed up.
Oh, you
Let's see.
Yeah, I think it's on that.
How come it only happens here? Can you see the,
And now click on swap display.
I have to walk over here to see the screen. There we go. So, sorry about that. Can anybody tell me who's this photo of? So this is a photo of Kathleen Archuleta. She used to be the director at Office of Personnel Management. So back in the 2015 timeframe, she had just been appointed to be the director of IT, and she inherited a mess. And in 2015, there were 2 significant breaches within the Office of Personnel Management, resulting in over 25 million identities that were exfiltrated to our adversaries. And the cost of that data breach, those 2 data breaches, cannot be calculated. And so I'm sure many of you in this room, I know Rebecca was affected, I was affected, many of us were affected. We'll continuously have our credit being monitored. But the cost of that breach was tremendous. And on this chart, there's a Ponyman, I think, no, it's a Verizon study where a lot of investment is going to prevent breaches. And I think we're doing a really good job of patching endpoints, but there's certain areas of cybersecurity that we're not doing as good of a job in. And as we pivot to the cloud, it becomes more and more difficult to secure your hybrid infrastructure. And so that's what I'm going to focus on is the problem space that Saviynt fits into. And it's really around the end state of continuous controls to provide visibility, compliance, and prevention of what individuals are doing with their access at all times. So in the past, organizations have kicked the proverbial can down the road and said, my network is my perimeter. But when we go to the cloud, it's clear your network is not your perimeter. It's really the identity. It's who has access to what is that access secure, what is the person doing with that access, and do they have access at the right time? And so that's really what the firewall is it's the individual, not only in the cloud, but it's the same as on-prem. And so there was another study that was run also at the same time of this OPM breach by the Ponemon Institute. And the reason why I focus on these 2 artifacts is because this is the time frame in which Saviynt became a commercially viable product, and also when the analyst community started to cover Saviynt. And so we were looking for marketing research that kind of coincided with our go-to-market. But what this Ponemon Institute slide shows is where the majority of the investment from CIOs and CISOs, where they were going to be spending their money in the future over the next 12 to 24 months. And the number one area that they were going to be investing in is access governance. Because it's really difficult, it's getting more and more difficult to breach the perimeter. And so the hackers or the external parties are more focused on social engineering and phishing attacks. And so it's very, very difficult to prevent data exfiltration, fraud, audit failures, much less knowing what people are doing with their access, the insider. But a lot of attacks are taking place where people are just mimicking the insider or hijacking their credentials. In fact, while I was sitting down during the Fugue presentation, I was getting a notification on my smartphone that somebody was trying to log into my Yahoo account. And fortunately, Yahoo doesn't have passwords anymore, so I wasn't able to, I didn't acknowledge that I was trying to log into Yahoo. But this is a big space of investment, especially in the US government as a result of the CDM contract with DHS. A lot of investment is being made. But this is an area in which the US government is looking to use on-premise technology, first-generation technology, to secure the hybrid cloud. And this is the space that Saviynt fits into. But one of the challenges, or 3 of the challenges that organizations have with trying to secure identities in the cloud is traditionally you have to write a lot of code for workflow approvals. So when you want to get access to something, you have to go through an approval process. And to use this legacy tech, whether it was developed in-house or commercial tech, you have to have expertise in the code and APIs and how that actually software product was developed. And it becomes a failure point. Another failure point is onboarding applications. You have to write a lot of code to onboard applications, whether it's a legacy application or a cloud-based application. And the third failure area is all the different control frameworks that are available in the marketplace. You know, you have PCI, you have SOX, you have HIPAA, you have FISMA, you have, I don't know, ITC or ITG 50, whatever, what you have in the IC. But there's all these different control frameworks. And these different failure points, it's good for the systems integrators where they can bill a lot and reinvent the wheel at every customer or every government agency. And so what Savient did is our founder started a company back in 2003 called Vayu that was acquired by Sun. In 2007, shortly thereafter acquired by Oracle. Our founder saw all of these failures taking place around the world, including healthcare.gov, and he wanted to bring to market this next generation technology to address application security once and for all, as well as cross-application security. And so he left Oracle, he started Savient, and so basically what we've done as a company is we've eliminated the need to write code for workflow. It's truly, if you can use Visio, you could truly use our infrastructure. If you want to onboard applications, you leave it up to the mission owners, and it's more of a wizard type approach to onboard applications. And all the different control frameworks, what we've done is we've created a controls exchange where you can pivot between different control frameworks on the fly because we've done the mapping for you. But at the same time, you're able to add your own controls. It's easier to start, it's very difficult to start with a blank sheet of paper, but if the controls already exist, it's easier to enhance those controls. And another thing that we did is we separated the IT logic from the mission logic. And so the Savient delivers our technology such that we manage the IT side of it, and the agency focuses on the mission and the outcome. And so it gives the agencies a lot more versatility in who they select to help them with their access governance challenges. So that's the domain that Savient fits into. And as you can see, as you go into the cloud, you have a lot of applications that are out there, whether it's Oracle's cloud, it's Office 365, it's Amazon, SAP, Epic. And traditionally, organizations still rely on application administrators for each one of these. So if they try to do governance, it's typically at the CRUD level, the create, read, update, delete level. It's not at the fine grain, it's not at the application level. And so what Savient did when they architected the platform is they focused first on the fine grain governance within each of the applications, so you don't have to have an application administrator for every application that you have out there. And so that's where Savient started, and it was in the fine grain domain. And then what Savient did is they built this big data platform, purpose-built for governance. And at the end of the day, the power of the platform, it's the open data model. And so this is the problem space that Savient is focused on, is putting a single pane of glass around your high-value assets, whether it's in Office or whether it's in Azure, whether it's in AWS, whether it's in GCP, whether it's in Oracle's cloud. And all that is just software-defined infrastructure. And so basically, Savient is putting this single pane of glass. But also, when you look at the government lacks the maturity to go into a government community cloud. They're going to run their own private clouds, AWS, Azure, GCP, et cetera. They're going to run on-premise. And so one of the challenges that Savient's also addressed, and we've actually put it into production in the US government, is to take our binaries and let our customers deploy our binaries on top of their CI/CD pipeline using their version of Linux and whatever assets they have already in their own virtual private cloud. And so that's actually how DHS has deployed Savient, is in a virtual private cloud, because I'm still not convinced that the government's all going to go to a government community cloud. And so I think it's maybe 60% is probably going to be a virtual private cloud if you look at the IC community and C2S. If you look at some of the, like HHS, are using more government community clouds. So in one you're going to need FedRAMP, and the other one you're going to need the versatility to deploy within the agency CI/CD pipeline, regardless of which cloud infrastructure they're using. And so Savient has been able to master both of those deployment models with zero loss of functionality. And so also, when you start to look at application security and identity management, this is a very challenging domain. So you have privileged access management, you have software-defined infrastructure governance that you heard about from Fugue, you have application GRC, that's the security that goes on within the application itself, as well as your traditional identity management, which is also at the CRUD level, at the create, read, update, and delete. And so what's needed here is there's an opportunity for disruption, is to basically have a unified tool set here that focuses on the identities. And so just like with PAM, typically you deal with agents, you deal with session logging, you deal with shared passwords or user IDs. And so one of the things that Savient has done in the cloud, since it's software defined, we've eliminated the need to share or have passwords or shared user IDs or anything of the sort, or any vaulting or any agents. So basically within an SAP or an Oracle EBS, what you do for privileged access, you go through an approval cycle and you elevate the account's permissions, and then you ingest all the usage data, and then at the end of the access, you do a micro-certification, and you remove the access privileges. So that's the analogy that Savient has taken to, for cloud-based assets, is eliminated the need to have a vault. We do use a vault for sharing of secrets, but not a vault in the traditional sense that you see with the legacy providers. And so what Savient is doing, you'll probably hear more about it in the future if you follow Gartner in terms of what we're doing with PAM, as well as application GRC, segregation and duty management, and your traditional identity governance and administration domain. So we all heard about healthcare.gov and the big fiasco that they had there. And so that's through the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid. And so that agency is Savient's FedRAMP sponsor. But when you're granting access privileges to an organization, it's very complex. There are a lot of stakeholders involved. You have information security, you have auditors, you have application owners, mission owners, et cetera. It's very much of a team sport. It's not a trivial exercise. And so this is the domain that Savient fits into, and this is the domain that we had the benefit of looking at the first generation technology and designing those bottlenecks out of how to implement this technology in a complex organization that's heavily regulated. So, we have lots of customers. We're tracked now the last 3 years by Gartner and Forrester. But what I wanted to mention here is the impact that FedRAMP has had on Savient as a company itself. And so when I first started at Savient, our CEO would kind of joke, oh, here comes Mr. TLA. And I was like, what is TLA? He goes, 3-letter acronym. And so now our CEO, our CISO, our Chief Cloud Officer, they all know all the 3-letter acronyms, and they embrace it because FedRAMP is actually taking Savient security posture to the highest level possible. And you'd be surprised the number of institutions around the world that are very curious about FedRAMP and its impact on Savient. So, so what we've done to address the U.S. market is we've built our environment around AWS, Azure, and GCP, the government community clouds. But the very first thing that we did is we got FIPS 140-2 validated. And we also stood up a U.S. government SOC. And that basically means that our SOC is logically and physically separated from our commercial SOC, and our ITSM is deployed within our security boundary to ensure that data, government data, does not leave U.S. soil and is not managed by non-U.S. persons. So there's a lot of things that Savient has done to help address the sustainability of access governance in the U.S. public sector. And so our FedRAMP is just weeks away from being completed. It's right now in front of GSA for a final review. And so, the deployment, private cloud, on-premise, community cloud, zero loss of functionality, and it's really important that when you're addressing access governance that you're not making a capital investment into something in which the vendor is going to take off and leave. And so as part of this model, Savient only sells with a subscription model. And that means that we always have a seat at the table. The customer's not happy, they can leave our environment without an issue. But I think that was a shameless promotion of Savient, I'm sorry. But I'm very excited about this domain, access governance, and the disruption that we're having in this marketplace. So with that being said, that's all I have.
Questions? I have one. What's your micro-certification?
Oh, so basically you don't want, so typically with a certification campaign, you do everybody in the enterprise on a quarterly annual basis, but with privileged users like privileged access governance, you should really do it as when the person's access is removed. So you just do it at the one person level or the multi-person level. That's a micro-certification. So that's what we're doing in terms of privileged access governance, is doing a micro-certification on each person that's checked out a high-risk entitlement.
Have you solved the problem of offboarding? Everybody's really good at onboarding.
Yeah, that's what continuous controls are all about. And that's what the beauty of having a controls framework is about. If you haven't accessed your account in 90 days, you should be offboarded, or that account should be suspended. And so those are some of the things that are automated within our continuous controls environment, because Savient's a one product, one platform. We ingest all the usage data from a curated log. It could be from Splunk, ArcSight, QRadar. So we're ingesting all the usage data, and we're extracting the usage events in near real time. We're built on ELK, and so we know when's the last time somebody accessed a specific entitlement, a specific application. And so since we have the usage data, we're using intelligence. We're automated analytics, or you could call it machine learning. So across the board, we know what's going on with peer group analysis, and this is where it comes in with the automated offboarding or suspension of an account. So just as a follow-up, governance is really focused in the ICAM domain. It's not focused on authentication. It's focused on audit, authorization, and administration. And those are the three areas that Savient focuses.
Anybody else have any questions? It's your last chance.
So that means you have automated policy enforcement?
Yes, and that's basically when you have the usage data, we're able to make compliance a preventative security measure.
So say your CIO decides that he wants to deactivate a system, pulling something from some of the tools that he dashboards these. So you could go in there and automatically parlay Savient to turn off that system.
Yeah, to turn off the system, the endpoint, whatever needs to happen. And also do the same thing for an individual or an administrator. All right, thank you.
All right, the cases are loaded, and Sean Donnelly's gonna hit them all home. Sean leads cybersecurity research at Expanse Incorporated. He's a passionate cybersecurity researcher with extensive experience in the industry. He holds a BS and an MS from the Naval Academy and Boston University. He was an active duty Navy cryptologic warfare officer. He worked for NSA before becoming the technical director of the Navy Blue Team of Fleet Cyber Command. So I think this is a whole different skill set here. Excited to hear. Please give a warm welcome to Sean Donnelly.
So for a number of years, I was solely interested in hacking things. Fortunately for me, early in my career, I learned what nation-state level hacking looked like, what was involved, the associated tools and tradecraft, the opportunities and limitations, time, money, relationships, and other resources. Offensive security, or hacking, for me was exciting for a number of reasons. I was the first mover, and this proactiveness involved being stealthy. My actions unbeknownst to the target until it was too late, if ever. I was a part of the group doing the influencing, steering the engagement, and the work was impactful. In contrast, defensive security to me was purely reactive in nature. The actions and defenses were overt, and success was only ever defined as not knowingly being exploited. And as I continued on my information security journey, I received new assignments, changed locations, and along the way, I stumbled across a few defensive security presentations which really opened my eyes. It was the first time I looked at cyber defense as compelling. I soon assumed a technical leadership role for a defensive Navy cyber team. I was tasked with deploying a large team around the world to assess arguably our country's most critical networks. Around this time, threat hunting was really starting to gain traction. This concept of proactively searching for malicious activity on assumed normal networks given my offensive background, I felt I had a head start here. And so threat hunting became my new hobby. And turns out building security skills doesn't exactly involve social interaction. So I'm sure my fiance would agree that I can feel our eyes rolling right now. And so my team had a wide variety of commercial tools, some would argue too many, and together they helped us passively and actively gather tons of internal network data, join and enrich that data with other intel sources, and visualize and identify instances of interesting communications. But looking back, we were still missing some things, and for the most part, we didn't really realize it. At best, we only knew what we were able to know. And what I mean by that is, we only had insight into network devices and communications that were within line of sight, what I sometimes refer to as the first hop. Furthermore, we didn't know everything we owned or managed, we didn't have a real-time internet-facing view of our networks, and we didn't have an understanding of what these networks were communicating with. The thing is, these shortfalls aren't localized to my past work. They're the current problems in government and commercial enterprise networks, and they aren't easily solved organically. At Expanse, we've built solutions to these problems. When I decided I was going to separate from active duty, it was under one self-defined stipulation. I would go on to make more of an impact than I was already making. So I mentioned I thought defensive cybersecurity was reactive, and it turns out that it's actually mostly the case. Even proactive threat hunting only uncovers information stored somewhere in a log about something that's already happened. It is entirely necessary work, along with malware reverse engineering, and most threat hunt tools today work to scale this type of analysis and decrease time to detect, but there is more to be done. In the present realm, continuous monitoring of your network's edge is one thing, seeing what your assets are reaching out to in real time. Is it a reputable domain or IP? Has it been around for a while, or was it created last month? The reality is, 99.9% of human internet traffic has been defined. And up until relatively recently, we knew what your network should be reaching out to. But now there's cloud infrastructure with domains related to legitimate companies. There's legitimate companies whose domains have been compromised, and now they host malicious subdomains. So then what about the future? Well, the future of your company is dependent on the actions I listed. The future of cybersecurity, I can't tell you that. I'd argue nobody can tell you exactly what type of attack will be prolific even next year. But what about a 1 week look ahead? What if I said in some cases you could know what was going to attack you before it did? All that was to lead up to this point. As lead of cybersecurity research at Expanse, I can tell you that we, on a weekly basis, identify network infrastructure that has been stood up in the world to carry out enterprise network exploitation, but it hasn't been used yet. At Expanse, we say we discover the assets on your network's edge and what's talking to them, whether that be on-premise, or cloud, IPs, or domains. We aggregate and deliver this information through a web-based platform without any on-site installation. We gather this information in part by globally scanning the internet just about every hour. The rate at which we scan is important. Since we often see critically vulnerable applications or devices up for only a week or a day, which is plenty of time for an attacker to gain access and pivot through your internal network. We also alert you of interesting external network communications. For example, imagine learning near real time when your network has communicated with an IP associated with a domain which communicates with another IP that's part of a botnet. This can be done with access to global NetFlow data. You can know if your network communicates with cloud infrastructure that is malicious, based primarily on what else it's doing out in the world. Expanse offers this capability through our partnerships with internet service providers. These offerings are valuable in many different scenarios, one of them being mergers and acquisitions, providing insight into the true attack surface of a third party. Lastly, at Expanse, we have a dedicated team to extend the capabilities of internal threat hunt and incident response teams. With a small bit of seed data, we leverage a number of organic and third-party data sets to bring insight and context to a hunt or an investigation. Now, you no longer have to be constrained to the first hop. Your 3-mile line of sight can be 300 miles. Knowing what I know now, cyber defense is as close as it's ever been to the attacker. We know what they're doing before they think we do, which is powerful. We're post-attack and pre-attack and everything in between. Any questions on that? On what on my work or anything I might have mentioned?
Is this technology able to be used for offensive cyber operations?
It is not, no. In some cases, we have government contracts. It is purely used for what we call cyber pursuit. This is proactive defensive cyber. Any other questions?
How does it differentiate from BitSight?
Sure. So BitSight mainly, so first, BitSight runs what's called a sinkhole, a DNS sinkhole. It's called Anubis. And the way that BitSight is able to know whether you may have a compromised node within your network is it will reroute traffic. The malware that's internal to your network will reroute traffic to the sinkhole. Well, because they own the largest sinkhole in the world, basically a network of infrastructure, of nodes, they can then say, hey, we saw your IP reaching out to us, but it was meant to be routed to something malicious. So in contrast, we can see the connection to BitSight. We can see your connections that are doing other things outside of what BitSight may know, to maybe scanning the internet, mass scanning it because your node's been compromised and it's now being used for nefarious purposes. It could be seen reaching out to sites or IPs that are not on the Alexa top 1 million, for example. So I can go into a bit more detail, but that'd probably be the best answer I can give you in short.
Well, that explains the extension of the 3-mile view to the 300-mile view.
Correct.
And is it strictly public facing?
Yes, in most cases. So our threat hunt incident response team, which we have a team called, we're classified under we call cyber research engineering, and we often actually work with our customers to bring in internal data from them so that we can piece together the internal hunt with the external gray space information and intelligence we can push together. And that's proves to be very, very beneficial with getting more ground truth right off the bat. Some of that internal data can be very granular, DNS logs with packet size and every single connection. So it's useful.
Very cool. Thanks.
So what kind of tools do you use to correlate all that data?
So they are proprietary tools, and I'll say we've built a series of internal tools that are querying our data sets and stacking them together. So if you could imagine having access to all passive DNS data, to global net flow, to the open ports and services of every node that you own for 5 years in the past, for all certificates you've ever hosted in any other place that those certificates has ever been hosted, public keys, SSH public keys, same thing.